Good day, everybody. We are starting 3.4 operations with radicals. Okay, sorry, I have to kind of just write this out because I ran out of ink. Okay, so number one, so if you print this out, number one says simplify the following radicals. Okay, so the first question is the square root of 50. By the way, radical, this is a radical. So something under the square root sign or under the root sign is called a radical. And there are two ways we could write radicals. One in the form that it's in, which is called an entire radical. Entire radical. And then we could write it as a mixed radical, which is what we're going to do now. Okay, we're going to turn this from an entire radical into a mixed radical. Okay, so this is how it works. So we have the square root of 50 here. Okay, if you were to square root it, you would get a decimal. So 7 point something. Okay, so we don't want to square root it into a decimal. But what we could do instead is simplify it. Okay, so the way we simplify it is we break down the number under the radical sign. So we break down this number 50. So what we're going to do is break it down into two numbers. So two numbers that multiply to 50. But what we want to do is what we want to do is one of the numbers we want to break it down into can be square rooted. Okay, so the first one, what we're going to do, if we divide 50 by 2, we get 25 and 2. Okay, so we get the square root of 25 times the square root of 2. So 25 times 2 is 50. So we're breaking down the 50 into numbers that can multiply into it. But again, we want to have one of the numbers that it can be square rooted nicely. So in this case, 25 can be square rooted nicely. So the square root of 25 is 5. So we square root the number that we can, and then we just carry down the one that square roots into a decimal. So we just leave it as 2. So we have 5, the square root of 2. Okay. You want to choose, again, two numbers with one of them being able to be square root, but you want this to be the highest possible number that can be square rooted. So in this case, it's 25. Okay, so that was A. So let's go to B. So the next one is square root of 128. Okay, so we're going to break down 128. It's kind of trial and error sometimes to figure out what numbers will work. So start with the number 2. So divide this number by 2 and see if the answer has a number that could be square rooted. Then start with 3, 4, 5, and so on. So if we divide 128 by 2, we'd get 64. Okay, so the square root of 64 times the square root of 2 gives you 128. So 64 times 2 is 128. 64 can be square rooted nicely. So square root of 64 is 8. And we carry down the root of 2. And then that's it. You don't have to do anything further. Okay, let's move on to number 2. So number 2, the question in the notes says multiply the following radicals. So we're multiplying. So we have the square root of 5 times the square root of 8. Okay, so just multiplying is just that. We just multiply the numbers and keep the square root sign. So if you multiply them, you get the square root of 40. Just going to check at the back of the book, then simplifies it. So just give me one moment. I don't think they use any numbers that could be square rooted nicely. Let's see. to be on section 34. Okay, so what we want to do when you have it here and you multiply it, sometimes if you could reduce it, then we want to do that. Okay, so two numbers that multiply to 40 and that could be square rooted would be the square root of 4 times the square root of 10. When you square root 4, you get the answer of 2, and 10 you can't break down into any numbers that could be square rooted, so we carry down the 10. So we have 2 root 10. This was for A. Okay, B, we have 2 root 6 times 3 root 6. Okay, so now we have, by the way, these are called mixed radicals. So we have the entire radical, and when we break it down, we get a mixed radical. So this is a mixed radical. Okay, so moving on. So we're multiplying now mixed radicals. We multiply the numbers in the front. So we do 2 times 3, which will give you 6. And then we multiply the numbers underneath the radical, or the square root sign, and we multiply them together. So we have the square root of 6 times the square root of 6 gives you the square root of 36. Okay, and again, we want to see if this could be simplified. So the actual square root of 36 is 6. So square root of 36 is 6. And now we simplify it further. 6 times 6 is 36. Okay, moving on to C. 3 root 2 times 2 root 6 plus root 10. Okay, so we have a radical outside the brackets, and then two radicals inside the brackets. Okay, this has an addition sign, but you'll learn in the next example that we can't add these together. So what we want to do is distribute the radical outside to both the terms inside of the brackets. So we're going to do 3 root 2 times 2 root 6, and then 3 root 2 times the square root of 10. Okay, so again, we multiply the numbers in the front. So 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 2 is 6. 2 times 6 is root 12. Plus 3 times the number in the front of here would just be a 1. So 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 10 is 20. So we have 6 root 12 plus 3 root 20. Okay, so now we want to see if we could reduce this. Okay, so the square root of 12, we could break it down into the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. You could put a multiplication sign here, you don't need to. And then our 20 can be, again, square root of 4 times the square root of 5. Because 4 times 5 is 20. Okay, and I picked these numbers. We could have done 6 and 2 for 12, but you can't square root 6 and 2 nicely. Okay, likewise, we could have done 10 and 2 in this one, but the square root of 10 is a decimal, and the square root of 2 is a decimal as well. So I picked 4 because we could square root 4 for both of these. Okay, so this is all multiplication together. These are being all multiplied together as well. Okay, so now we're going to actually reduce simplify the root 4. So the square root of 4 is 2. Keep the square root of 3 because that'll turn into a decimal. Again, square root of 4 is 2 times the square root of 5. And the last step, we're going to simplify the multiples in front of the radical. So 6 times 2 is 12. carry down the root 3. And 3 times 2 is 6. And carry down the root 5. So again, we're multiplying, so we distribute the mixed radical that's in front of the brackets to both the mixed radicals inside the bracket. Multiply the number in the front of the radicals together, and multiply the numbers underneath the radical together. So 3 times 2 is 6, 2 times 6 is 12, 3 times 1 is 3, 2 times 10 is 20. Then at this step, we want to see if we can reduce any of the fractions. So 12 breaks down to root 4 and root 3, and the square root of 20 breaks down to root 4 and root 5. My dog came to say hi to you guys. Hey, Coco. Okay, so then we square rooted each of the numbers. Square root of 4 is 2. Okay, and then we multiply the numbers in the front. So 6 times 2 is 12, 3 times 2 is 6. Okay, and we can't add these, as I'll show you in the next example. Okay, so number 3 says add or subtract the following radicals. So we have 5 root 3 plus 3 root 3. Okay, so we could add radicals if the radicals are the same. Okay, so it's kind of like having 5x and 3x. Okay, so these are both x's, so we could add the coefficients in the front. So this would be 5 plus 3 is 8. So same thing here. So 5 plus 3 is 8. And then we just, since we both have the root 3, we just keep it as root 3. So add the coefficients in the front. So 5 plus 3 is 8. And then bring the root 3 down. Okay, again, at this step, you want to see if you could break it down, but in this case, you cannot. Okay, B, we have 2 root 2 plus 3 root 5 plus root 2. Okay, so we're going to add. Again, we can only add like radicals together. So the like radicals that we can add is the 2 root 2 and the root 2. Okay, this is a square root of 5, so we can't use that number. So we're just going to do, we have 2 root 2's here, and this is a 1 root 2, so that gives us 3 root 2. And this 3 root 5 doesn't have any like terms, so we just bring it down, and there's 3 root 5. Okay, moving on to C. Square root of 12 plus the square root of 18 minus 27, square root of 27, and the square root of 8. Okay, I'm just going to pause the video there so it's shorter clip.